afternoon, everyone. Welcome to our OKR workshop today. And on behalf of the entire Valiantys team, as well as the three of us here with you this afternoon, we are so glad you were able to spend a little time with us and join us. So before we get started, I would like to introduce today's event and our speakers. So my name is Brianna Hopper, and I will be our MC today, making sure that we stay on schedule, helping get those questions answered, and providing any content and information that you may need before we part ways this afternoon. For today's session, you'll be hearing from Sam Ayers and Bonnie Byer, who are going to bring a wealth of knowledge around OKRs, and they both have a proven track record of helping our clients achieve their goals. So with that, if you are wondering why you received a copy of John Doerr's Measure What Matters, let me go ahead and introduce today's topic. As many of you all know, is Objectives and Key Results, or OKRs. So today's event is supposed to be super interactive, so be sure to share any of your questions in that Q&A feature on Zoom, and we'll be sure to answer as many of those as we can live. Of course, if our time runs short today and we aren't able to get to your question, I'll be sure to drop our speakers' emails as well as my own in the chat towards the end of the session, and you can reach out to any of us and get some one-on-one help. You also may have noticed when you joined today that the event is being recorded, so if you do need to jump early and you have some other things to attend to, rest assured that this is going to be on our YouTube channel, and I can drop that link in the chat for you once I'm done, and you'll be able to subscribe to that and get notified when this gets uploaded, as well as any other content. And then you'll also be receiving an email from me afterwards with that link directly to this recording. So today's intention is to provide a lot of useful information on OKRs and some practical strategies on how you can manage them within your Atlassian suite. So with that in mind, let's talk about those OKRs. Bonnie and Sam, are you guys ready?
Yeah, for sure. Thank you so much for the wonderful introduction, Brianna. Happy to be here with you guys. I just wanted to start things out just very quickly, just sharing about Valiantys, just on a high level in case you've never heard of us. Just wanted to share a few things about us, just so you have some context for who you're interacting with today. So Bonnie and I work for Valiantys, and we are a platinum solutions partner with Atlassian. Which you'll see some Atlassian tools later on today as we get to the tools demonstration portion. But just kind of on a broad scale, we are a platinum solutions partner, like I mentioned. We also offer a series of other offerings to our clients and also just to the greater public in the way of free trainings. We have a full stack software development center of excellence that allows us to build custom dev solutions that live on top of Atlassian tools and other tools outside of the Atlassian ecosystem. And so ultimately, Atlassian relies on their partner network to work with clients to implement Atlassian tools. And that's exactly what we do. And that's exactly what we've done for quite some time now. So really, we focus on Atlassian consulting, custom development kind of within the Atlassian ecosystem, and then training is another big focus that we offer, not unlike the event that you're really experiencing today, but we also offer a bunch of free webinars and free content online on our YouTube channel. So I encourage you guys to check that out as we conclude today. And also just want to point out that we are also Atlassian's first global partner. And so we have a presence in North America, Europe, Asia Pacific region, and then also Africa. And so just important to note that really we bring a wealth of experience on a global scale and have worked with many different clients from many different fields within business, and just bring a wealth of opportunity and experience to our client engagements. So again, would love to work with you guys in the future if you have any consulting needs in the Atlassian realm or even outside of the Atlassian realm. As an enterprise consulting firm, we look to where we can help our clients best, even outside of the Atlassian ecosystem where necessary. All right, so with that, enough about us. We want to jump into the focal point of today's presentation. And with that, I want to pitch it over to my very capable cohort and OKR expert, Bonnie, and she's going to talk about objectives and key results.
Well, thank you, Sam. Good afternoon, everyone, or evening, wherever you are. Yeah, we want to talk about objectives and key results, and that's what OKR stands for, of course. Um, and this is really a framework that has transformed how companies are able to operate, how they're able to actually achieve their goals and measure that they were actually able to achieve those. It's inspired by the book that Brianna mentioned, Measure What Matters by John Doerr. And so we're going to explore how OKRs can align and they can motivate your organization to achieve great things. So we'll start at the core. Simply put, objectives are what we are aspiring to achieve. They are, you know, where the rubber hits the road, the quantitative goals that are designed to propel the organization forward. Key results, on the other hand, they are measurable, quantitative outcomes, and they track the progress towards those objectives. So together, those will form a clear, actionable framework that bridges the gap between ambition and what reality ends up being. Go ahead and go to the next slide, Sam, please. And so we often hear KPIs, key performance indicators, and they sound very similar to objectives and key results. If that sounds the same to you, you're not alone. We often hear them used interchangeably, but it's important to understand that they are actually very different. They're both very valuable, but OKRs is typically more forward-looking for big transformational changes that we are trying to achieve, and KPIs are often more towards current progress, current status of how we achieve our current progress. So, anyways, so they're valuable tools in setting and tracking our goals, but they do serve very different purposes and they operate in distinct ways. So let's talk about what they are. So OKRs, they are goal oriented. They're focusing on setting and achieving those future objectives. KPIs, those measure our current performance. Again, it's existing benchmarks. We want to use those to maintain or just incrementally improve existing systems. OKRs, they'll encourage setting stretch goals that aim for significant impact. Whereas KPIs, they typically track our performance based on expected outcomes, not future goal setting, but what are we expecting just to achieve the quality that we expect to achieve. OKRs, they offer flexibility so that you can adapt and change with your quarterly reviews or reflecting shifts in our priorities or pivoting in our strategy. KPIs, they provide that stable measure of performance over time, emphasizing consistency and incremental improvements. OKRs, they will promote organizational alignment and transparency. We use them to foster a sense of shared purpose. KPIs, while they're critical for operational success, they often focus on specific areas or departments, limiting their scope. So by understanding and utilizing that distinct strengths of OKRs and KPIs, organizations can effectively set ambitious goals and measure that performance and drive continuous improvement across all levels of their organization. Let's go to the next slide. So in a world that's constantly evolving, OKRs are an area for focus and alignment. They ensure that every team member understands their role in the company's success, and they foster transparency and collaboration. OKRs are not just goals, they're a communication tool, and that's used to align and motivate the teams and the individuals on those teams, motivating them towards those common objectives and ensuring that everybody on your team is actually rowing in the same direction. An organization that does this well will follow a pattern of executive leaders setting those goals for the organization and then clearly communicating them. These broad organization goals are then elaborated by the team leaders. They need to break them down into meaningful objectives for their team members. This gives all team members a true line of sight on how their work will contribute to the success of the organization as a whole. Let's go to the next one. So setting powerful objectives is an art. They should be significant, providing real value, and you want them to be concrete and easily understood. They should be action-oriented, inspirational, and aligned across the entire organization. A well-crafted objective will challenge the team. It's going to spark engagement. It'll set the stage for impactful achievements. Remember, objectives are the vision. They answer the what and the why of what we're doing. Next slide. So key results will turn objectives from a wish into that plan. We often hear about SMART goals, and this lines up really well with that. We want them to be specific, time-bound. We want them to be aggressive, yet realistic, so we make them pragmatic. We want them to be measurable as well as verifiable. The best key results will leave no room for doubt on whether they've been achieved. They quantify success, measure progress, and keep that team focused on the outcomes that matter. So let's talk about some examples of OKRs. So we call this one a poor OKR example. It's make our bank more popular is the objective, with these key results of get more likes on social media, increase the number of accounts, and make customers happy. They seem like good things, but this is not a well-written OKR. And let's talk about why. Next slide. So when you look at it, the objective itself is very vague. Make our bank more popular. That is too broad and is not specific. It doesn't convey a clear direction or an end goal. And then look at the key results. They're very, they lack a lot when it comes to the specifics. The key results are not quantifiable. They're not measurable. They lack specific targets or timelines. It makes it difficult to track progress or determine whether or not you were actually successful. Get more likes on social media. It doesn't specify how many likes or by when. How many did we get in the past? I have no idea. We can't understand what increased the number of accounts when we don't mention the types of accounts or what that desired growth percentage should be. Making customers happy, that's very subjective, and it lacks a metric for measurement. So really we have a lack of alignment. The key results do not clearly align with the objective in a way that they directly contribute to making the bank more popular. They are more tactical than strategic. So now let's look at a good example. So how would we improve this? Increase the bank's brand awareness and customer base in Q1. That's pretty specific. We want to, with these key results, we want to grow the social media engagement by 30% through targeted campaigns by the end of Q1. We want to increase new checking and savings accounts by 20% compared to Q4 2023. And then improve customer satisfaction score by 15% as measured by a standardized customer satisfaction survey by the end of Q1. So why is this improved? Well, let's go to the next slide. These are specific and they're measurable. The revised objective is clear and it's time-bound and it provides a specific direction, increasing that brand awareness and customer base. And those quantifiable key results are a vast improvement. Each result has a specific measurable target and a timeline, and it makes it possible to track progress and to evaluate your success. It specifies the type of engagement and a target percentage increase, and it clearly defines the product. It's the checking and savings accounts that we're looking at, and the growth target. Also, it uses a standardized customer satisfaction survey to measure that improvement, making it actionable and measurable. And so These key results are directly aligned with the objective, contributing to increasing brand awareness and growing the customer base. They are strategic and they're focused on impactful outcomes. That makes the alignment and strategic focus for these well defined. This improved set will demonstrate how you can provide specifics, measurability, and alignment with strategic goals, so you can turn a poorly written OKR into a powerful tool for driving success into the financials. So let's go to the next slide and let's talk about how do you want to implement OKRs? Well, it requires more than just understanding. It does demand action. We found that the success is found when you start small. Start with a pilot program. Ensure that top-down support from the executive leadership, while also fostering that bottom-up engagement from all of the team. Use the OKR cycles for continuous improvements to set, evaluate, learn, and reset. Evaluate and learn and reset, etc., etc. You want to embrace that transparency, allowing everyone to see both the forest and the trees. And most importantly, you want to celebrate progress, not just completion. Next slide. So to get started, you're going to want to educate your team. You're going to start with workshops. Maybe share this recording to start. Or you'll have some meetings to explain the OKR framework that you're going to implement. You're going to emphasize its role in aligning and motivating the organization through that shared communication for those common goals. Then you're going to define some company OKRs at the top level. Collaborate with that senior leadership to set 3 to 5 strategic objectives for the company. Attach those 3 to 5 measurable key results to each of those 3 to 5 strategic objectives. That way you're going to be able to quantify success. Then you're going to cascade those OKRs downwards, and each leadership level in between is going to work with their departments and their teams to develop their own OKRs for that line of sight, so that their OKRs, you want those to align with and support those company-wide objectives. And that will ensure everyone is working towards the same goals. And then you can even cascade down into the individual contribution. Encourage every employee to set their own personal OKRs that contribute to their team's objectives. That will foster accountability and engagement at all levels. But this is where it gets tricky sometimes. A lot of people fall through the cracks. You need to make sure you're doing those regular check-ins. You want to implement those frequent OKR review sessions to monitor progress and input all of those key results. Celebrate the achievements, and then address any of the challenges. At this time, you might need to actually adjust some of the OKRs as necessary to reflect those changes in strategy or in those priorities that might have pivoted, because things do change over time. And so those check-ins are great for that reset and adjustment. And so you're going to learn and adjust after each cycle and conduct a retrospective. That way you can gather those insights and feedback on the OKR process and on the OKR tooling. You're going to use these learnings to reflect and then refine the next set of OKRs. So now that our foundation is set, let's start discussing tracking your progress. Sam is going to give us some demos. So Sam, you ready?
I'm ready. Thank you, Bonnie. That was the perfect setting of the stage of what I'm about to show you guys. And as I'm going through the tools demonstrations, I'll make an attempt to tie some of the functionality back to the themes that Bonnie just mentioned and just shared so eloquently. And so I'll try to tie the tool functionality back to what we just learned about OKRs where possible as I'm moving through the demonstrations. So with that, let me just briefly intro what I want to talk about. So there are several options to create and track OKRs within Atlassian products. And I'm going to take you through a couple of those options today. So first, I want to demonstrate how we can create and track OKRs within a product called Atlas. And then subsequently, via Atlas, how we can visualize OKRs across the entire Atlassian product line, wherever work is happening within it. And then next, I want to demonstrate how the OKR Hub specifically works within Jira Line. So let's kick off the demonstrations today by jumping into Atlas, which if you're in the Atlassian ecosystem, you're starting to see Atlas kind of almost everywhere today. So I just want to start I'm talking about Atlas if you're not familiar with it. Atlas is a tool that allows one to connect teams across your company to organizational wide goals. And I'll explain that in more detail in a moment. And on a high level, it helps teams stay in sync as a result because it connects them to their apps and work wherever it's happening. So Atlas's ultimate goal is to help teams understand what they're working on, why they are working on it, how it's going, and then what does success look like. It also helps stakeholders be in the know on a high level for how their organization is progressing towards achieving organizational-wide goals without getting bogged down into the nitty-gritty details of Jira project level tasks, user stories, and the like. So conversely, it allows teams to see how the work they're working on aligns to the broader goals of the entire organization. Similar to what Bonnie was talking about in OKRs. We want to align work at the team level to organizational wide goals, regardless of what goal framework we're using, but specifically in OKRs. It's important to mention at this point that even though this is an OKR event, Atlas doesn't subscribe to one goal framework. And as we probably know, there are several. The way that Atlas works is very freeform and allows you to use it in a manner that's best for your organization. And that's by design from Atlassian's perspective. But that being stated, I'm going to make an attempt, as I mentioned before, to demonstrate how it can be used as a vehicle to track OKRs. So just to make a distinction, this is kind of the jumping off page for Atlas. And it's quite helpful in and of itself, as you can see or probably surmise from what you're seeing on the screen. There's all kinds of organizations or Jira organizations that I can dive into that technically have sites rolling up to them. And so it's a jumping off point to not only to use Atlas, but ultimately log into various sites that you're a member of. It gives you a helpful frequent places, basically things that you've visited frequently. And then also down here, you have a recently worked on and or viewed pane that you can interact with. And so this is a landing page that you're probably actually somewhat familiar with, just if you're in cloud at all, because a lot of times, often when you log in, it defaults to this particular page. In Atlas, I'm going to jump into the project section here of Atlas. And I'm going to close our little Clippy helper there. And in Atlas, we have several what are called projects, but I want to be very clear about something. They're not to be confused with what we know a Jira project is. So if you're in the Atlassian ecosystem, you know that Jira, everything is an issue that lives within a project, to put it very simply. And just being very clear that a project in Atlas is not equivocal to a project in Jira. So while Jira projects, just to make the distinction even further, are where teams track their work, Atlas projects represent what Atlassian refers to as a stream of work being completed by a designated owner and a targeted completion date. That's pretty much it. Atlassian suggests that an Atlas project is more than two people working on something for more than 2 weeks. So they set the bar very low and very intentionally, just again, further pointing to the fact that Atlas is very wide open and flexible in its use. And as you can see from our list of projects, I feel like our list of internal projects with our demo site highlights this pretty well. You can see that we have an engagement project. So somebody's using an Atlas project to track engagement work for a client. We have a generic IT project. We have a marketing team that's using Atlas to track a marketing campaign. We have an HR team down here that's using something to track or using Atlas to track all of their HR work. And then the list goes on. Where we're going to spend more of our, or most of our time during this demo is within a project called Sam's Music Store Goals. So I'm a musician. I had a dream once to open a music store. I thought I was going to be an entrepreneur, and that's fine. I got into the world of IT. Those dreams were dashed against the rocks, but you'll see a music store theme pop up occasionally in my demonstration. So that's why you're looking at a music store. And so this is where the project, in my example, is a container of goals that a leadership team wants to tackle maybe within a year or 2-year period. And so while my Atlas project has goals associated with it, it's important to note, and I want to stress this, that we can create goals also autonomously from Atlas projects. To put it the reverse way, you don't have to have a project to have goals. You can create goals on their own. And so they can exist independent of one another. Again, try not to beat a dead horse here, but just to highlight that the Atlas tool is very wide open on how you want to use it. So to put it kind of plainly here, we can create high-level organizational goals or lower team level goals or lower level team level goals to anchor our work to. So since we're talking about OKRs today, though, we do this in Atlas by creating goals as our objectives. And then we have an opportunity to create what Atlas refers to as a sub-goal. And we can leverage sub-goals as our key results. So real quickly, though, before I jump into that, I just want to talk about the project view just as a whole, just to give you a better understanding of what's here when you look at a project. And it's pretty simple. On the landing page for a project, you kind of just have an about section. And typically in an executive summary of some kind, or at least on a project, you probably want to have some kind of summary of what are we doing, why are we doing it, and ultimately what does success look like. And that's where you could throw in some of your objectives on the splash page if you wanted to use a project for your objectives. Similarly, we have an update section for our Atlas project. So similar to what Bonnie was saying, where we want to make sure we're updating our teams on the status of OKRs on a very regular basis or cadence. This is a way where you could use a project for OKRs to send out those updates. And ultimately, they go to your key contributors over here on the right that I've designated. And we'll go over the right side pane here very shortly. We've got a learning section. So this is where we can link to external documentation, learnings from related projects if we want to. So there's a lot of flexibility here in how we use this section. And then really, helpfully, we do have a risks and decisions section where we can call out risks. It's kind of a much simpler risk register if you're familiar with using those during engagements. And then same thing with decisions. Not totally dissimilar aesthetically to the decisions macro that you see within Confluence. This is probably somewhat familiar to you if you're in Confluence Cloud at all. So pretty simple. And then over on the right, this is where, well, before I get over there, I'm getting ahead of myself, but this is where we can update whether or not our project is on track, and then ultimately set the time frame for that project up here. But then on the right, we've got an option to follow this project, share a link to it. And then our projects always have an owner, which I think makes sense. And then we have our contributors here within the project. So this could be hypothetically your executive leadership team. Maybe not the whole world needs to be a contributor here, meaning you don't need your devs working an alpha project on software development maybe to be a contributor, but just something to think about. You could hypothetically, if you wanted to, though, if you had a team level project in Atlas. And then you also have this idea of a follower. So contributor juxtaposed to follower. And then this is really what we want to spend some time on. This is where our project has goals that are linked to it. And so you can see that our project is linked to these goals, and these goals contribute to the project. So let me open one of our objectives here. And just to highlight, there's no default designation, again, going back to the idea that this tool doesn't ascribe to one goal framework, but to highlight that we are specifically using OKRs within this tool, I've simply just added the prefix of objective and even numbered the objective, and then essentially provided the summary for that objective here. And then what's nice is within Atlas, we can leverage kind of this parent-child relationship between goals of goal and then sub-goal. And so that's where it's a wonderful opportunity to use key results, or I'm sorry, use sub-goals to track our key results that link up to an objective. And so just real quickly, if I'm on an objective and I want to create an additional key result, I could just click this plus button on the right and either search for an existing goal or create a new one. And this is where I could say key result number 4, add a summary here, choose a target date, whether it be a day specifically, a targeted month within a year, or a quarter. And then from there, I could click create, and then you will see it populate under here. So pretty easy to do and a really, really easy tool to use. One thing too that I want to really highlight is the goal scoring feature within our goals that's available here up at the top. We have a really simple dot menu that we can interact with. Basically, it's a score from 0 to 1, and 0.1 being we're way off track, and then everything in between, we start to get at risk at 0.6, and then we're on track from 0.7 onward. And so very quickly, we can share an update as we're updating whether or not we're on track, at risk, or ultimately in trouble of being at risk fully. And so when I click an update within our dot menu here, this is where I can add an update to the rest of the team. This message is going to be blasted out to our key contributors. And then we have an option to set a time frame for the current status and when it'll be done, etc. Add emojis, add attachments, add links if need be, add more detail. And then we have this nice summary of our sub goals down here at the bottom as a reference as we're posting as well. And goal scoring, just as a side note, allows the goal owner to score a goal based on their current projections. So as a side note, goal owners within Atlas receive a monthly automated message from Atlas as a reminder to share an update with stakeholders or folks that are following the goal, which is over here in this menu here. So you have the ability, just real quick to kind of show you some of the admin functionality, you do have the ability to turn on the goal scoring feature, which you can see here. So similar to Jira, we have our handy dandy admin cog up here. I will say the admin settings within Atlas are wonderfully simple, actually. So within workspace settings, if we scroll down, this is where we have the option to use a simple status or status and score, which is what it's set to now. Just to show you what it looks like if we're on the simple status, we can click save and then go back to our goal. And you can see we simply just have kind of an easy to read status. And so if you don't want to get into scoring and you just kind of want to highlight, are we on track, at risk, and you don't care as much about the 0 to 1 scoring feature, you can use just a simple status, which should look familiar aesthetically to what we see often, or see all the time, honestly, within Jira and updating statuses on issues. But with that, let's go ahead and switch it back. So we go to our settings, save, and then we've got our status score back and our menu here that we saw before. So let's create a new goal so you can kind of see what this would look like. So if I go back to our project, and we've got our contributes to goals down here. This is where I can, again, search for a goal. This is the key result that I just created. And we're just going to create a new goal here. And this is where we give our goal name. And let's say our goal is to, and I'm just going to pretend we have, we're a bank and we want to create a mobile banking app. So we'll say become the #1 free, not freeze, although that's what we're doing right now in St. Louis with this wonderful cold weather that we're having. Free mobile banking app for developing countries.
Would you be using that naming convention with the objective at the beginning of it?
Yes, 100%. Thank you for saying that. So what we would want to do is you could use OB. I've even seen folks put, OB in brackets. So you could have objective like this to highlight that, or it could simply just be O for objective if you want to shorten it. Or like what we have just to keep in step with what we've been using, we just have objective, let's say 6, and then colon, just to keep the same kind of format. But again, if you want it shorter and that might be more readable, you could just put O in brackets. I've seen folks do that. Yeah, great call out, Bonnie. And then from here, let's just choose a quarter and then click create. And then from here, you can see that by default, this is where we land. We have a pending status that we need to interact with. And so we need to give a current status sooner rather than later. But as I showed you in other goals, we have a description of the goal that we want to add. We've got comments that we can add and contribute to on this specific goal. But to flush this out and really make it a fully fledged OKR, let's go ahead and add a key result. So with that, let's add a sub goal. Like I showed you before, we'll create a new goal. And similarly, we could say key result 1, or I kind of like the idea, and I've seen this used as well, of just putting key KR in a bracket, and we could say improve weekly signups by 15% by July.
Sort of like the good OKR example we had.
Exactly, right. That's the goal anyway. And we'll go to July and then create. And then you can see that our sub goal or key result in this case populates immediately. And we have our objective here at the top as well that we can interact with and update and say the current status. Let's say we're on track, and we can say we're on track, and we would want to give more detail than that probably, but you can add as much or as little detail as you want to here, post it, and then you get a wonderful little confetti. And you can see, not dissimilar if you're familiar with Jira software or really any Jira product like JSM, of looking at the activity stream of an issue. We kind of have this almost like a comment section would be parallel to Jira to maybe help you conceptualize this. Wonderful. So one thing that I want to pivot to that we often get asked about with Atlas and just kind of Atlassian tools in general is how metrics are handled. And the reality is that there isn't any calculation functionality for your metrics within Atlas, like what you'll see in Jira Line a little later on. But you can add fields within Atlas that could be visualized on goals as a workaround. So as we all know, key results are measurable targets, as Bonnie was mentioning earlier, that define the success of an objective or goal. And they're typically measured in one of the following. So count, dollars, percentage, NPS or net promoter score, or just a score ranging from 0 to 1, like what we see within the UI here. And what I was saying earlier is you can create fields within Atlas that would ultimately support these various forms of measurement. So within our goals, we're offering fields that allow one to choose the metric, whether it be count, percentage, currency, or other. And then you have an option to select your metric goal, which is kind of just a generic number text field. And then also track your current metric, which is your current metric, but also just a number field as well. And so let me just show you, just from an administrative perspective, if you want to add these fields. Again, drawing a parallel to Jira, this would almost be kind of like adding a custom field to Atlas. Maybe that's a way of putting it, just to conceptualize it a bit further. But if I go into the admin settings where I was before for the scoring feature, I can go to this menu called Fields, and you have fields at the project level that you can add, or you have fields at the goal level that you can add. And this is where we've added metric goal, and then current metric. And just to show you in the UI what it looks like, this is where you give your field a name, the type, and then also a description for it if need be. So pretty easy. And then ultimately when you add this, it shows up on all of your goals. All right, and then another workaround, and I kind of call this a workaround. I will mention that we expect some kind of automation or automated capability for calculation to appear for goals down the road. That's something we expect. And so hold on to your hats, keep an eye on Atlas, keep a really close eye on Atlas if you're interested. and tracking goals within your organization and within the Atlassian ecosystem, because we do expect that to come down the road. But another option would be to post an update simply within the objective itself. And so you could say, you know, something to the effect of our base is 60, goal 80, and currently 65 or something along those lines. And let's say, you know, you didn't have the kind of 1 to 0 or 0 to 1 tracking capability. You're just tracking whether or not you're on track, off track, etc. This is where you could post to that goal and have that update go out to all of your team also. So simple workaround, but effective nonetheless. Okay, so with that, just kind of in the spirit of what Bonnie was sharing, where we want to link our objectives in to where work is happening within Jira and other tools. Goals are happening over in Atlas. Atlas is really the solution for tracking goals within the Atlassian ecosystem as it stands today, if you're outside of Jira line. But I want to show you how they can be visualized kind of everywhere within that Atlassian suite of tools. Before I do that, though, just to kind of punctuate what we're talking about with Atlas, I want to show you this really helpful diagram that our very own Brian Darr created. And something just to kind of highlight and give you, actually, let's see if that's going to let me. Let's see if, there we go. Just needed a second go. So we have our clients asking us a lot about Atlas. There's a lot of curiosity around it. And a lot of times we're just getting asked, what is the value add for Atlas? And hopefully I've started to unpack that with my demonstration. But they often ask us, not only what is the value add, but is this something we need to hire you guys, meaning Valiantys, to help us implement? Is this something that we can kind of take and run with out of the box? You know, what's the barrier to entry, in other words? And this diagram that Brian created, I feel like is really, really helpful. And he's used it actually with our clients to really describe kind of how Atlas works and how it connects across Jira and other mediums where you might be tracking work. So as we know, work is typically happening at the Jira team level. So for example, we could have teams working in sprints on these epics. And then we've got task or the task level that really could be user stories. Maybe, for example, that developers are operating and working in that roll up to epics. And then we have introduced an initiative layer, maybe for our executive team to kind of track how all that work is rolling up to company-wide initiatives. However, it's also possible you could be working in other tools such as spreadsheets, for example, or Trello. And the idea of this diagram is that Atlas and or Jira goals allow for goals to be visualized and communicated and reported on. And so a goal, just to highlight, an Atlas goal can have epics tied directly to it. Or you can have your epics rolling up to initiative and then an initiative to a sub goal. And when you're looking at this diagram, I want you to think with OKR glasses on, so to speak, and think of goal as really being your objective and then sub goal as being your key result. And so in this case, just to highlight, we can have an initiative that links to a key result, or we can have an epic that is tied directly to an objective. There's a lot of flexibility on how you can build this out architecturally. But in summary, you're able to link your team level work directly to your objectives. Exactly what Bonnie was sharing earlier, which is the idea that we want our teams to be tied to our company-wide objectives so they understand what their work is ultimately contributing to for the organization. And so we won't demonstrate this today, but just as a side note, since it's on the screen, you can also tie Google Sheets very interestingly via to a goal via a project. So for perhaps the use case could be you're providing weekly project updates in a Google Sheet. So just wanted to highlight it because it's on the screen. Okay, so with that, now that you've seen an overview of how the data is connected, let's look at a plan within formerly called Advanced Roadmaps. I believe it's actually just called Roadmaps now. And this is a plan that I created for my music store example. And what I've built out in the way of projects containing tasks, or what you're looking at is I've created a series of projects with tasks that roll up to an epic layer, and that they are ultimately tied to Atlas goals, or in this case, key results. And so again, further highlighting that we have a wonderful view within the roadmap. And something that I really want to highlight is that we have all kinds of teams dispersed across the company working on things that aren't really related, but they are related insofar as they're connected to key results that ultimately roll up to objectives, just like what we're talking about. So I want to highlight that we have a sales and marketing team that's working on everything in the marketing realm autonomously from a development team or a product and inventory management team. And ultimately highlighting that these teams are all working on work that is meaningful because it's tied to, and it's meaningful inherently, but even made more meaningful to those teams because we're tying them to key results and thusly to objectives. And so if I go into one of these goals, basically when you enable Atlas, you have the ability to add the goal field to your plan, which allows you to add or subtract goals from your individual Jira issues. And so, for example, this one here for our product and inventory management team, even if I just run my mouse over this goal, I get this summary here of the goal itself. And then we've got a preview here also that will load here. And this is where I can add an update directly to this goal from the roadmap UI, which is kind of cool. And then I can also anchor myself to the goal details, kind of what this goal is about, if those were filled out. But then also too, I can immediately jump back out to Atlas if need be and interact with this goal in that way also. So kind of neat. And then working backwards, you can see also when we've linked a Jira issue to our key result, you can see the backwards linking relationship that PIM2 and PIM3 are contributing directly to this goal, which is kind of neat. So again, that really back and forth, like exactly what Bonnie was talking about, that up and down linear relationship between the work at the team level, the work at the executive level, and then ultimately dispersed across many, many different types of teams, as you can see within this plan, and how they're all connected and ultimately united in a common purpose for our organization. Awesome. So with that, so again, just to highlight, we've got all these different teams working within the plan. So all that to say, Atlas really is the Atlassian goal solution at this point, and it's rolling out essentially to everyone. As I mentioned in summary, it's highly flexible in its use, and we do expect to see Atlassian really invest and expand on the features you've seen today in the near future. So keep an eye on Atlas. And if you're interested in implementing any kind of goal framework and visualizing those goals within that Atlassian ecosystem, Atlas really is going to be your vehicle to do that to date.
It's a very nice lightweight solution. I like that.
For sure. Really low barrier to entry and really easy to use. And honestly, it might be superficial, but I find it aesthetically very pleasing to use as well. So,
especially in the combination with advanced or with plans.
Yes.
Stop saying advanced roadmap. So just
I know. I've been trying to kind of eschew that that name as well. So totally get it. All right. Well, with that, let's talk about Jira Line and how OKRs are visualized in this tool. And so if you're not familiar with Jira Line, I just want to provide a very brief overview of what it is. Jira and Jira Line have very similar names, but they are truly, and I can't highlight this enough, two different tools that integrate and they do sync with one another, but they are truly two very different tools. They will have two different URLs, two different interfaces, and while they have similar purposes, there are some key differences between them that I want to highlight for our discussion today. So Jira software has some really good modules that help both Kanban and Scrum Agile teams plan and execute and report on their work. You're familiar with that if you're familiar with Jira. However, organizations that are moving up in layers of scale, often above the feature level, like to see the program, solution, portfolio, and enterprise layers. And they may find that they need the ability to conduct long-term planning across the enterprise. And that's where Jira Align comes in as a tool to handle strategic planning and ultimately scale development. So Jira is at the team level, and we really start using Jira Align kind of more at the program level. And so the conclusion to draw from all this is Jira Align is a massive tool that we won't cover in its entirety during this demonstration. We need a lot more time to do that. But if you want to know more about it, we do have Jira Align introduction webinars that come up periodically. We can share a link either maybe at this moment in the presentation or at the end of our presentation, or as Brianna mentioned, Brianna, myself, Bonnie can reach out to you if you're interested in that course content. It's free. And so if you're interested, I highly encourage you to consume our free training and webinars in that arena to get more acquainted with Jira Align. However, for today, what I do want to cover is where and how OKRs are used in Jira Align. So I want to start out in what Jira Align refers to as the strategy room. And the reason I want to start out here is we can see within the strategy room, and it illustrates this well, that OKRs are being used across the layers of scale that I referenced previously. So within the tool, you may have executives more interested in the high-level view of OKRs and their statuses across the organization. And this is where the strategy room view at the enterprise layer might be the most helpful view to them if they're actually licensed to use Jira Align. And so OKRs can be associated with strategies, goals, and themes, for example, but all goal layers can be treated as OKRs when key results are attached. So portfolio and program objectives with key results are rolled up by PI in the strategy room. So let's take a look at the OKR heat map. I was gradually getting there. And the average score that you see in the heat map is displayed to kind of give an overall sense of goal health throughout the organization. There's a lot of red on the screen. And so this would be a worrisome environment to be in. Luckily, this is a demo environment, but throughout the organization, so it gives you the sense of health throughout the organization with regard to how we're performing towards hitting our objectives. And so you can see that we have our strategic goals, portfolio objectives, program objectives, and then our team level objectives here. So under portfolio objectives, just to kind of dive in here, I want to open one of these as an example and show you an example of an OKR specifically. And let's just open the first one here. And when I click on it, it opens this side panel here that I want to talk about for a few minutes. So ultimately, what we have is very similar to a Jira issue summary. If you're familiar with Jira, we've got our summary for our objective here. We've got a description. And then we have our key results that are tied to those. And kind of similar to Atlas, honestly, in a lot of ways, we can add additional key results here, which we won't do right now. But you can add a key result very quickly, choose the type. Again, similar to our fields that we had created in Atlas, we've got a percentage, a count, a cost currency, a net promoter score, or just a generic score like what we saw in Atlas. We've got aligned work items here that I can expand and contract this caret here. We can see our epics that roll up to our objectives. We've got dependencies that can be called out here, risks, impediments here as well, and then also child objectives. So you have this child-to-parent relationship between objectives that you can leverage as well. And then up here at the top, very similar to what we saw in Atlas, you kind of have a status that you can interact with here. You've got an objective score, and this is where the automatic calculation comes in. And so this is where I can recalculate. I won't do this at this moment, but you can add a note for the score override and ultimately rescore. You get the program increment or the PI that this objective is associated with, sprint, start date, and so on and so forth. So a lot of detail here within just one objective. Let's go back to the heat map here very quickly in the strategy room. So now that we've looked at an OKR, I want to hopefully the heat map makes a little bit more sense and we provide a little bit more context for what's ultimately informing what we see here. So each row, just to kind of highlight or break down even more what you see here, each row contains blocks to reflect statistics for objectives at the strategic goal or objective level. So I know it's a little abstract, or at least for me when I was first looking at this, it feels a little abstract, but these are technically columns. So PI3, PI4, PI5. And then strategic goals displays a single block because they aren't associated with PIs, juxtaposed to the objectives, which are sorted by PI in separate columns, like what we just talked about. And then each block displays the average percentage of progress made on the key results at the strategic goal or objective level. And then for the strategic goal blocks, the percentage isn't PI specific. So for the PI specific objective blocks, progress is only calculated for key results of the objective at the specified level that they are associated with at the PI. So sorry, that was a mouthful, but I think you get the idea. And then just lastly here within the strategy room, let's just talk about the OKR tree that you see at the bottom. So this may also be a helpful view in this case, as it shows how all of your objectives and goals roll up to a defined strategy here at the top of the pyramid. And so all these associate up here. And then what's convenient about the strategy room in general, or the view as a whole, is that one can click, you probably saw me, but one can click the links that are available within the OKR tree, the heat map. You saw me drill out to program or portfolio objectives here. You can also do the same thing within the pyramid here as well. And I like to default open in a new tab. But that's what's really nice, is you can jump out to all of these elements pretty much with a link. All right, let's shift gears here. Let's look at a specific program. And then we're also going to look at a specific PI as well. So I'm going to deselect PI 9 and PI 6. Let's look at PI 5 and click apply. So moving to a more detailed layer that will ultimately get us to the point where we can demonstrate creating an OKR in Jira Align, I'd like to discuss OKRs on the program level, which is where we're at now. So now that we're here, let's look at the program board so we can see where objectives are housed. So within the program boards, I think this is one of the really cool views within Jira Align. We can see the team and program objectives up here at the top, tied to their respective PIs. And so if I run my mouse over one of them, or several of them, just to highlight this, and you can even see on this one, planning issues populates at the bottom. I can not only see what sprints are associated with them, but the color also denotes the potential for planning errors. And universally, we know that red is bad, green is good. And so if I click into one of these objectives, I can actually get an extra layer of detail right within the program board. So I can see for this particular objective, I don't have any planning issues. I can see the type of objective it is. In this case, it's a program level objective, as we know. The features that exist, dependencies, risks. So again, really, really helpful view, ultimately a really nice holistic view across all of your teams and how they're rolling up to the team and program level objectives. Okay, let's go to the objective tree here on the left. So now we're in the objective tree where we can view OKRs in even more detail and also actually create one as promised. So within the UI, the OKR hub presents similarly to a board within Jira software. This might be a comfortable view for you within the new UI that was semi-recently rolled out within the last year. And so the different filters available at the top are not unlike Jira issue board filters. And so we've got a search bar, we've got our program, or basically our dropdown for tier, where we can select a team or program or a goal tier. We've got what program we're in that we can select. We're in the mobile program, as we know earlier, that we drilled into, but then we've got all of our available programs here. And then I can also search for them just by typing in the name. Same thing with program increments. I can switch very easily and or search. I can also filter by status, which is really helpful if I want to zero in on objectives that are off track or at risk, for example. And then if I want to filter by my rule owner, I can do so quite easily as well. And then within the objectives menu itself, just real quick, there are quick filters. So I can look at only blocked, for example, or I can look at off track. And so similar to the status menu here, it's even faster to be able to click these handy checkboxes here. So let's take a look at the very first OKR in the list. And something that I want to highlight, just because we're in a different place within the UI, opening an OKR within the OKR hub, again, presents that menu that we saw back in the strategy room. So there's consistency across the UI, even though Jira Align is this massive, big tool. Atlassian has made every effort to make the UI as consistent as possible for ease of use as an end user of the tool. And so just wanted to highlight that, again, we see all the same menus and ultimately fields within an objective that we can interact with the exact same way on the objective I was showing you back in the strategy room. All right, so as promised, let's go ahead and actually create an OKR. And what I really like about the new UI too is that we can click the create button that we're all very familiar with if you're in the Atlassian ecosystem. So I'll click create. And then I want to go down to the other menu and then select objective. And then this is what I kind of call just it's ultimately a wizard that walks you through the process. It's really, really easy to follow. So we can say create an OKR. And this is where we can select our tier. So let's select program. And then ultimately select what program we want. In this case, let's do mobile just for the sake of consistency. And then let's click create an OKR. And then we can add our objective summary. So let's say it's reach a meaningful scale by achieving 5,000 software subscriptions per month. And then this is where we can hit our check mark to commit to that. And then let's just throw the same thing in our description for the sake of time. I've got my Mac brain on and I'm doing Control V with the command button. So I'll go ahead and click save. And we've got our description as well. And then we want to schedule our objective. So we'll say this PI, which is PI 9. We've got our objective reporter. We could change that if we wanted to another individual, but I'll keep it as myself. And then this is where we could add any contributors as need be. So I'll add somebody here. Just going to add my cohort Bonnie. We'll go with Adam though, for example. And then we'll say parent objective that this aligns with. At this point, I think we'll avoid putting that one in there. Okay, and then let's say add key results. And let's say NPS score above 90. And we'll say our key result type is net promoter score. Click add. And then we'll put our baseline of 90, our goal of 100, not 1,000. And then our target due date for completion. We'll just throw a day out there. And then our key result owner is me. And then we've got net promoter score as our type of result as we already designated. And then up at the top, we just click align work items. And we should be able to click publish at this point as well. And this is where we could add a feature if we wanted to, any dependencies, risks, or impediments. And then presto, we can update the OKR. It's within our OKR hub at this point. And we can click the ellipses here. And we've got a few different options here, but we can copy the objective, we can delete it or view the audit log, etc. But this is also where we could update it as being on track if we wanted to and interact with it however we need to now that it's created. All right. Well, with that, that concludes what I wanted to demonstrate today. And at this point, let's go back to our presentation. All right. And here we have some free webinars that are coming up, and we've got our strategic portfolio management. Oops, I didn't mean to jump back. Our strategic portfolio management webinar, that's tomorrow. So if that piques your interest, please feel free to sign up for that. We've got our introduction to Jira Align, what I alluded to in our presentation, coming up January 30th. So again, if what I demonstrated today within Jira Align kind of whets your appetite for just Jira Align in general, and you feel like that would be maybe a good fit to explore for your organization, highly recommend that you join that introduction to Jira Align webinar. Again, it's free. And then if you're interested in using Confluence, we've got an introduction to Confluence on February 6th. And then if you're interested in some of our paid training, that's a little bit more hands-on for Jira admins and Confluence admins. We have a wonderful Jira Align bootcamp, and then also our Jira bootcamp. I've been through this bootcamp myself and can really attest to the quality, not only the quality of training, but how quickly it gets you ramped up in kind of the Jira admin role. So just want to make sure I highlight the Jira bootcamp itself is really geared towards Jira admins managing Jira software and other products. We do have a Jira service management bootcamp that kind of follows, or at least is from the viewpoint of a Jira admin in kind of the JSM realm as well. And then we have our Confluence bootcamp also on February 13th. So a lot of free training coming down the pipeline, and then also some hands-on training as well. Brianna, did we have anything else that we needed to wrap up before we jump to questions?
I think you hit all of them on the nail. I've dropped all of those links in the chat to our YouTube, to the training website. I did pull the specific link to Jira introduction to Jira Align if anyone is interested. But yeah, I think you got all of those in there. So whenever you guys want to start the Q&A session, I think we're ready to go.
Okay, wonderful. All right, I'll take a look and see if we have any questions. Yeah, so one thing that I do get asked about, and actually was previously in this presentation, was can you track OKRs outside of Atlas or outside of Jira Align? Are you limited to Atlas, in other words? And if you had asked me probably about 1.5 to 2 years ago, even in this demonstration, there might be a video floating around out there still to this day. There is a way that you can use a Kanban board within a Jira software project to track and manage OKRs. And then you can use the subtask functionality or an Epic to user story or task level parent to child relationship, and kind of use a Jira board in a de facto way to track OKRs. And then from there, you could leverage using native Jira issue linking relationships between epics and the task level within your OKRs, and your epic or parent relationship being your objective, and then your children of that parent being your key results. You can use native issue linking through Jira. I've seen that work. I've seen that demonstrated. I would say if you can, or if there's interest in implementing goals, I really would encourage you to really consider adopting Atlas. I just think it does what we just described and what you can do on the Jira software side, just much better, much cleaner. And with what we saw today, it integrates so well across the ecosystem. It's not a bad way to do business. And it's ultimately what we encourage you guys to do. So if Atlas is unfamiliar to you, again, feel free to reach out to myself, Bonnie, Brianna. Let us know if you have any questions. And as Brianna mentioned, I believe we've already shared our email addresses in the chat. Please feel free to reach out to us if there are any additional questions. Cool. I think with that, that might conclude our Q&A session. Bonnie, any last words?
Just, I got to agree with that Jira Bootcamp. Every single client that I've had that's taken that class has had rave reviews for it. And I just happened to wanted to mention Jira Line Bootcamp. We do have this public offering of Jira Line Bootcamp, but I'm actually giving a private Jira Line Bootcamp next week for a client. So we also do that if you wanted to have one that's specific just to your organization.
That's awesome. Yep. Totally echo what you said, Bonnie. Thanks for sharing that. All right, guys. Well, greatly appreciate your attention today. It was a pleasure being with you. Thank you so much. And please, again, feel free to reach out to us directly, either via email, or you can find Bonnie and myself on LinkedIn. Please feel free. Don't hesitate to reach out. And we hope to hear from you. Thanks again for your time today.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
Bye now.